Welcome to another episode of Money You Should Ask. I'm your host, Bob Wheeler, and in this episode, we're going to explore, question, examine, converse, dig deep, expose, laugh, and cry about the money beliefs, money blocks, and life challenges of our next guest. Turn up the volume, listen, learn, and laugh.
Good news, bad news. Bad news first. Growth comes from learning, which is a lifelong endeavor. Good news, growth comes from learning, which is a lifelong endeavor. At the Money Nerve Academy, we hold space to explore, navigate, discover, and heal your relationship with money. With our online course, Mastering the Emotions of Money, you can get in touch with your fears, blocks, and beliefs around money so that you can become more aware of your current financial story. By understanding why you do what you do with your money, you can create a different ending to your financial story than the one currently taking place. Check out themoneynerve.com and start mastering your emotions of money.
Well, I feel really appreciative and grateful to have our guest today. He's attended the University of Santa Barbara and USC. He actually had a multi-decade career at Goldman Sachs, starting from the 80s up until 2008 when he retired. He's a significant benefactor to UC Santa Barbara, serving as the chairman of the foundation board, vice chairman of development, vice chairman of membership. And he is an active speaker on the subject of relationship management, which I'm really, really interested to hear about, and sales at universities, philanthropic organizations, and service companies. And he is also the father of 5 successful children and maintains an interest in the development of informed, enduring, and sustainable human relationships. Please welcome Fredric Steck. Fred, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, very much so.
Well, I have to start off with this very first question. I get the sense that you advocate for your kids in the way that you describe them as successful. And I'm wondering, did your parents advocate for you?
They did. My father was an only child from Missouri. My mother was born in Los Angeles, and she was one of 6 children. And my parents were very involved with their 3. I have 2 sisters, and both of my parents, my father especially, was a brilliant guy. Went to USC, at the age of 16, graduated from Harvard Law at 22. And education was really paramount in his life. And he was also a guy who treated his children equally. My 2 sisters can throw a baseball better than I can. And so he was, he and Mom were slightly ahead of their time.
That's awesome. Now, were you the youngest or in the middle?
I'm the middle child.
You're the middle child, me too. Okay.
Yeah, always a great place to be. When they're looking for you, they don't really care.
That's right. The pressure was on your older sister, I would imagine.
Very much so.
And they got to make mistakes with her, and then you got the benefit of maybe a little less pressure.
That actually is really true. The oldest child, there's some benefits, but not. If you have to go first all the time, it's a tough sled.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy in the middle. In the middle.
Yeah.
Do you remember your parents talking about money, and how did they handle it?
That's actually a really good question, and it's significant in terms of how I view it. My parents were very conservative. Not in a political sense, but conservative in how they conducted their life. They did 2 things, which one that I think is very important, and that is they shared all information. Everything was in community property, but more important, they talked about money together. Mm-hmm. Versus, and I have many examples where the male component of that partnership is the one that's handling it. And when you ask, the spouse, Fred takes care of that. And that wasn't how I was brought up. I was brought up to watch my parents treat their relationship as a partnership, especially in the world of finance. They were not risk takers in terms of money, and I remember when I first started at Goldman, I went to my dad and said, I'm working for arguably the best investment bank in the world. I said, if you'd like, I can connect you up with somebody that could really help manage your wealth. And Dad never did that. He had a guy in Pasadena that he liked, and he was a bit of a loyalist. And when he passed away, he was worth a little bit, but not a lot. And but the mortgage was paid, and so it's a very conservative approach to money.
Did you do the same with your kids? Did you talk about money when they were younger? Did you let them in on it, or did you sort of keep that to yourself?
No, we talked about it. It's I was of the mind that my children knew as much of what was going on as anybody else in the household, and we shared both emotionally as well as, and when I say emotionally, my parents were conservative in many respects, and we were not an emotionally emotive family. And so when I started having kids, they were never going to doubt the fact that their dad loved them.
Yeah.
And so even to this day, I have two older boys, and our salutation is always, "I love you." So because of that, we were more open, not only in discussing issues of the day, but also, issues of money and the importance of money and the importance of discussing money. It wasn't, the joke is, the dentist has the worst teeth in the house, right? Well, money is a tough issue. Most people don't like to talk about money. They think it exposes them. Maybe it's too secret. And, if you're in the wealth management business, money is truly just a number when you're talking about how one wants to organize and invest those funds.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any phrases that your parents used that you adopted that you shared with your children, like money doesn't grow on trees? Was there some through line that you've passed on consciously or unconsciously?
That's a good one. I don't really remember a specific thing. There were times, I guess, when it wasn't so much of a phrase, but it was the discussion of sort of how much they were contributing. And I tried not to do that. Money is a great a tool for guilt, and I considered my responsibility for children was to get them as prepared as I could for their growth, for their world after they've left the house, and so. Giving information, sort of on life as well as getting them prepared was really important, more than phraseology, and tried very much not to wow, that's awfully expensive, that, and look at all that I'm doing. That was never, I paid for your education,
right?
Therefore, you should. I was not that guy.
Okay.
If you didn't want to pay for their education, then don't have them.
Right. Exactly. Did you get an allowance as a kid?
I did. not early on. I think the first time I remember having money was when I started losing teeth, and the tooth fairy would
and
show
the tooth
up.
fairy
So
gave you money.
that,
Good investment.
that was always good. But yes, and when and I would say probably sixth grade, junior high, when I was, a little more mobile. I had an allowance, and then when I turned 16, I always had a job.
Yeah,
I always had a job.
yeah.
My favorite job was as a box boy at the supermarket, and I wanted a surfboard, and my father, he was willing to buy me a tennis racket, but not a surfboard. So, he had his priorities, and so I started working at El Rancho Market in Arcadia as a box boy. I was a member of the Retail Clerks Union, and earned enough and bought my surfboard. It was an Ole, O-L-E, from Seal Beach.
And do you still surf?
Not anymore. Not anymore. That's kind of moved on.
Okay.
The problem was I moved to cold water areas. I grew up in Southern California. Now all of a sudden I'm living in San Francisco. Water's cold up there. Who wants to do that?
Yeah. I wouldn't even. I'm just worried about the sharks. So unless I can surf in my bathtub, probably not going to happen. I saw Jaws too early.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Now, did your kids get an allowance?
They did.
Mm-hmm.
They did, again, about the sort of same time, seasonally adjusted for inflation. Yep. But my kids also worked. They did a little more volunteerism. Mm-hmm. I remember, for example, the three older kids, when they were going to the Branson School, this is high school now, they worked for a philanthropic organization called Caring Bridge, which was an outreach to the underprivileged kids in Richmond across the San Rafael Bridge, hence the name. And they were quite serious about that, and they were camp counselors and that sort of thing. So they all, in fact, all of the kids had a real orientation towards community giving. And so one way or another, God bless me, I had money to advance them an allowance, even though they weren't getting a W-2. But I felt it was more important since they all recognized that they grew up in a family of privilege, and this was never anything they didn't understand. Yeah. They understood that their largesse was a great benefit to them, and they took it seriously.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I feel like that's gotten lost these days, where I feel like people used to, and maybe that's just me, reminiscing, but I feel like people used to be more into civic service and more about philanthropy and understanding that you have a responsibility. I was taught that as people with privilege, and not that I had a lot when I was growing up, but I went to a college that was very privileged, and they made it very clear to us that we had a responsibility to help other people since we did get this privilege.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I mean, my parents, we lived in Arcadia, which is, at the time, I think we were really, definitely, middle class, perhaps a little better, maybe upper middle if we wanted to put kind of labels on it. But, we were not, as kids, we were not traveling to Europe. There was no PJ, there was no yacht, there was none of that. Yeah. And my kids didn't grow up like that either. I mean, we got to go on vacations and we did all of that. But I always felt that if we were going to be given you know, this particular life, then we were going to be held to a higher standard, and that what we owed society was to make ourselves as beneficial to society, and to actually you know, work with the community that we lived in. It was all that was, you know, you were asking me, did you talk about money? We did talk about money, but we really did talk about money in terms of what it was that we could you know, do for the community, what we could do with the money, not what we could have with the money. That was you know.
Well, that, you know, I was going to ask you, was philanthropy always important to you? And it sounds like it probably has been. And I'm really hearing like it is about giving back. But can you say more about why it's important to give, or why you think it's important to give?
So when I was thinking about this, because I actually did listen to some of your podcasts. When I was in junior high, I don't know why I remember this. We were at First Avenue, which was in Arcadia, and it bordered a very busy street. And I was sitting there with three of my friends, and we were talking about things we wanted, things that we could buy. You know, I want this kind of a car. Oh, we're going to have a house, and it'll be in the Oaks. You know, it won't be down. You know. And and you know, when I got to UC Santa Barbara, I got hooked up with a couple of people who were working with more disadvantaged youth in the Santa Barbara area, and I began to come to the conclusion that our family was really blessed with being able, you know, my parents paid for my education. And I did have a job, you know, while I was there. But regardless, you know, I had a pretty good run. And so the idea of giving really started in a more serious way at when I was in school, because I really did feel that I had been given a great pathway and should be held to, you know, to a higher standard. When I was at Goldman, giving was extraordinarily important to them as a firm. And to this day, they have many, many different outreaches. But when I became a partner, one of the requirements was that we had to start a foundation. You know, because it was a partnership, the firm really depended on the individual owners, if you would. And we all had foundations. And so, you know, again, you know, giving back to the community was an understanding that we had been, you know, we had been given a great opportunity to provide for our families, but we also were given a great opportunity to discover what we could do with our money, not what we could buy with it, but what we could do with it that might benefit others.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, what I'm hearing, even though the word hasn't been said, but it sounds like coming from a place of gratitude.
Yes. Yeah.
Of just really like recognizing the blessings or the good fortunes that may or may not have come to you through sheer luck or just situational.
Yep, I would agree with that. Gratitude is a terrific word. It's more than thank you. It's really with gratitude. It's really that acknowledgement that you did something for me more than you know, than an exchange of you know, goods for services kind of thing. It's really it has something to do that's you know, it's a deeper understanding that you went out of your way to be gracious and to you know, to help in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any financial regrets?
I do. I was thinking about this, and I'm using this phrase of what you can get with your money versus what you can do with your money. To me, it's a nuance of difference.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the issues that goes on in Wall Street, broadly defined, is there is a lot of purchasing. It's hard not to get trapped into the Joneses have a better car.
Right.
And then when you're earning and you actually could get a better car, you get trapped into that's really the goal. The goal is to, and so I probably have, I have not managed the largesse that I was bequeathed through my own work, of course, and was a little bit like I got trapped into the all-you-can-eat buffet.
Right.
And that's an easy thing to do. You can buy a nice car, or you can buy some stupidly nice car. And I'm not a car guy, but it's just an easier thing to look at is they still only have four wheels, and they still can get you from point A to point B. And so I would say that, without getting into, the actual details, I probably have reached a little further than I should have, which also had the unintended consequence of not being able to sort of do more with the money you had. And I've talked a lot about recently with this with my kids about thinking when money is available is really thinking about the consequences of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So in talking when you're mentioning your kids, I'm wondering in this conversation, is it important to leave kids an inheritance? And also, whether it's yes or no, how much financial help should you give them?
I personally think you should help your kids as much as you can, and in terms of preparation. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, I have always felt it my responsibility to take care of the health and wellness of my children and the education of my children. So I have single-handedly supported private education. I was a public school guy, but my eldest daughter, Berkeley, public school, I know, Berkeley, UPenn, Columbia Law. Okay. My next daughter was Tufts, a Berkeley doctorate in psychology. Alex was UCLA, Vanderbilt University MBA. Wow. My youngest daughter was, Duke, Wesleyan, then London School, and then William was, Michigan State, which is a state school, but he was out of state.
Out of state.
and so there was never any guilt about that. It was my responsibility to make sure that they were prepared to get a real launch. And they have all done exactly that. They have all developed degrees, and they are all working on successful careers. Now, they have at the moment they don't have a trust fund. there's a trust fund. When I pass on, they will get something. Yeah. But by that time, they're going to be, well, hopefully they'll be really,
hopefully,
but but they're on the other hand, when we go on vacation, if I can pay for their flights, I will do that. But there isn't they are really responsible for building their lives and their careers, because I do think that is really important. We were talking a little bit earlier about Italy, and one of the interesting things, I happened to, my Italian tutor and friend of hers and her husband, they were all in Noci, which is a little town in Puglia, kind of the east part of the country. Anyway, we were there over last Christmas when we could travel, and I was introduced to their grandfather, who was a shoemaker.
Wow.
And he was still making shoes. And he took me into his shop and pointed out that his great-grandfather, his grandfather, his father, they all made shoes. And now what had changed in his life was that he now had more control of his time. He wasn't making shoes every day because he had an apprentice.
Right.
And he was passing that along. I think retirement has been a false goal in the U.S. because we're living longer, and when the phone doesn't ring, and so it sort of indicates that maybe you're not as needed. And I think we want to be needed, and so the idea of maintaining a something to do in your life is really important. Managing your time that's a critical phase, because maybe you want a little more time to visit your kids or whatever. But I think the idea of continuing to contribute to society rather than throwing in the white towel and just retiring.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was just on a show talking about the fact that the value of feeling relevant, of being important as we get older, and still being part of what's going on in society versus, we've been put out to pasture, and we're just going to play golf and fade off into the sunset.
Yeah, and that did come from my father. My father got, sadly, literally passed away on his way to a court hearing. He was 90.
Wow.
And he, when we grew up, he had a friend of his was living next door, and he worked for J.C. Penney. And J.C. Penney at the time had a mandatory retirement age of 60. Can you imagine that? 60 today, you're almost 60. You're just getting going.
You're just getting started.
Yeah. Anyway, and he retired and passed away within a year. And I think my dad saw that. He said, that's not happening to me. So my dad practiced law, literally died with his boots on, so to speak. But what he did was he didn't have as many clients, and he had control of his time. But he was relevant and needed, both with his family and with with the outside world.
Yeah, that's awesome. There are so many stories of people retiring and then passing right after they retire, and never even getting to enjoy those retirement years because of that.
You can only go to so many museums. I'm sorry.
I would agree with that. My father might disagree with you, but I certainly agree.
Right.
If you think back along your life, when were you the happiest, and how did money play a role in that?
I do think that I was the happiest and felt the most relevant really when my kids were actively in school. When I was, I will tell you, you haven't asked this question, but maybe you will, maybe you wouldn't. I really, truly enjoyed my time at Goldman Sachs. Mm-hmm. This was not just because, Wall Street making a lot of money, that sort of thing, but I really, truly enjoyed those years. And those years of raising my children, they were seeing me as an important part of the community and an important part of their lives. And it was and you know, listen, I have 5 kids, so it lasted for a long time. But that was really a joyous, you know, period of time. I have struggled a little bit in recent years, partially because, you know, wanting to find that relevance, wanting to find that, you know, that job. You know, I make the joke, I need a job. And that could be broadly defined. But, you know, we live in a culture, rightly or wrongly, where there is an exchange of value when we contribute to our job, to our employer, to our community. And the idea of being remunerated for that with money, it's not the amount of money. It's the fact that if I hire you to do my taxes, if you're doing it for free, you know, I'll call Fred back. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
I'm going to call him back. It's part of the problem with philanthropy. If I'm doing things for you for nothing, I can call you back. If there is some sort of a contract of exchange for services, then there is an explicit and a non-explicit responsibility. And so right now I'm struggling a little bit with that. You know, I have too much time, if you would. And so during that period of time of you know, it was 25 years working with Goldman, raising kids, you know, being late, being, you know, early, worrying about the mortgage, all of those things. You know, people think, oh boy, I can hardly wait to get out of that. No, those are great times, honestly.
Yeah. That's awesome. But well, now one of the things that I think you might be doing to stay relevant is you have this interest in informed, enduring, and sustainable human relationships, and you talk about relationship management. Tell me about that, because it sounds juicy, and I'm attracted to it. So. Say a little more about that.
So I grew up as a, this is a bit of a story. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. When I first went to work at Goldman, my boss was a guy who was an old school sales guy. And so I was there for a week, and, you know, he invited me into his office, said, how's it going? I said, it's going great. You know, I'm on the phone, I'm talking to New York. He said, well, how many clients have you called on? And I said, well, I haven't called on anybody, but I'm on the phone. I'm ready to receive their phone call. And he said, well, here's what we're going to do. He said, you're going to come in here Monday, and we're going to go over the accounts that you're going to call on. And then you're going to be out of the office. And I said, wow, that sounds like sales. And so when I finally understood that I was in the business of selling, now what we've done with sales and is that we have made sales a quantitative experience. You know, Salesforce, for example, will give you all the software to let you know how many times you called your clients, what their performance is, and they've really quantified it. Business schools teach marketing. They don't teach sales. Right. And sales is all about managing relationships. So if you're good at your personal relations, you're probably going to be pretty good at sales. So for example, if your spouse calls you and says, honey, on your way home, pick up some milk. And you do that and you bring it home. The message is, I listened to you. I care about you, and I followed up. I actually performed the task you asked. If I come home and I forgot, I wasn't listening too hard. You weren't that important. And if I forget again, then that relationship begins to unravel a little bit.
Yeah.
Because now you keep reminding them that you're not really listening, you don't really care, and you didn't follow up. So the same thing in sales. If I'm a car salesman, if I'm selling securities or whatever, you ask me to do something, I'm going to get it, and I do it, and I follow up. I've been trying to sell this ranch that I live on. It has been the single most difficult experience ever. And part of it is, and I'm going to throw them under the bus, is dealing with real estate agents. and I know, I hate painting things with a broad brush. But one of the things that is most irritating is the lack of follow-up. Yeah. I want to know what you're doing. I want to know who you've talked to, what they've said. And it's the same way as it's, and I know it sounds so simplistic, but personal relationships and managing those relationships, no matter whether you're related or it's a friendship, if you stop contact, that relationship is going to dissipate and might even go away. If you and I are friends and I never bother, we're living in different cities, I never bother to pick up the phone, hey Bob, how are you doing? Then pretty soon that relationship will go away. When you think about, I don't have anybody I really know that I went to high school with. Well, there's a good reason for that. I haven't bothered to keep up with them. Now they haven't bothered to keep up with me. But, that's a slippery slope if you're going to go there.
Right.
So managing those relationships. So I do. I talk to people about, I have a list of important items that I think make people good salespeople. And most of them are involved with the with your personality, with your personal life, making sure it's balanced, making sure you're doing something other than work. Because, if you and I are having dinner and I've got nothing but securities to talk about, I'm not a very interesting guy. And if I'm just like this, I'm not really learning anything while I'm talking, but I think you're interested because you're asking me questions.
Right.
And so that's what really makes quality personal relationships. It also makes good salespeople.
Yeah, the way I look at all my clients is I look at them as relationships. I don't look at them as tax returns. And I say I have 1,000 relationships because to me, this engagement is much more important. And one of the things that I think is missing in our culture at the moment, to some degree, is that we're out of connection, we're out of relationship. And I think people are hungry for that. I think as we've gotten more first world, and we can build fences and keep people away and we can afford to stay separated, I think we lose this connection and community that so much of us are, or I'll speak for myself, I'm hungry for.
Yeah. We're not going to get rid of the digital world. That ship has sailed.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important that you remember the analog part of your world. Texting and email, that allows the reader to put emotion into that message. And that may be an unintended emotion. It's also, if you don't have like an ongoing connection, it's very hard to just parachute in because there's no context. If my children are a good example. I literally talk to them all the time. My sister is like this. Her family, they have Zoom calls as if they were a corporation, right?
That's great.
But what they're doing is there's context. They all kind of know where people are in their lives. And so when you actually have a personal conversation, there's no catch up involved. You're kind of right in there. So I think it's great to be on the phone. I think these are terrific devices, but there is nothing more effective, in my view, than picking up the phone. This is a more effective conversation than it would be if we were on the phone, because I can see you.
Yeah.
We would be more effective if we were sitting in your office or having lunch or whatever, because now I get to read your body language, I get to see your facial expressions, and so we are distancing ourselves, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, I'm going to ask you this final question because this feels important because we've covered a lot of ground. I'm wondering, Fred, what do you want your legacy to be?
I really would like people to see me as kind and generous, not just with money, but with my time, that I was, again, without chest beating, I take a great deal of pride when I'm dealing with people who are of service. When I'm in a restaurant, I will always have a relationship with the service person, always, because save an interview, we're going to be there too. That's a hard job. Yeah. And so I think I would, like to be, that guy always went, not out of his way, but, always was, genuine and generous with, both time and treasure. That would be very important to me.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. It's sort of, in a way, it's sort of like investing. You got to put a little in and you don't even have to put that much in, and you can get a whole lot back. And I think people often miss the fact that we have to put a little time and energy into relationships to actually have fulfilling, deep, meaningful relationships.
It's like anything else. You work hard with your clients, and they see that. But that's the same way with your personal relationships. And again, we were talking about money. If that money is actually going in a way that is beneficial, that comes back in a big way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Fred, it's been awesome talking with you today. I could talk for probably about another 10 hours.
Yeah, me too.
I'm really enjoying it. But where can people find you on social media?
Well, now that I was dinging the social media, of course. So just very quickly, my youngest daughter, who lives in London, when I was grousing about the fact that this ranch hadn't sold, she said, "Dad, why don't you start writing your blog again?" And so I actually have a website. It's fredricsteck.com, and I write about I write about relationships, sales. I give the world my view on a lot of different things, and
that's great.
So it's a great joy. And if you want me to come speak, I can do that too. So anyway, and I just launched it 3 days ago. So
awesome.
We'll see where it goes.
Well, let's hope we get you 1 million followers in the next couple of weeks.
That'd be great.
We'll make it happen. Well, Fred, I so appreciate it. And I want to say to our listeners out there, please don't forget to share the love. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for Money You Should Ask, all one word. You can subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. And if you prefer to watch our episodes, you can head over to YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Fred, so much appreciation for joining us and having this great conversation, and I wish you much success.
With gratitude. Thank you so much, Bob.
Thank you.